A second.
Hello,
Wait, which one are
everybody
we
here.
reading?
I am going to smack this motherfucker if he doesn't open the goddamn menu right now. And I'm keeping this on the
It's
recording.
open.
Start reading, motherfucker. I don't
You
care.
can't get mad at me for it not being open because it's open. It's been open for
But
20
you don't
minutes.
have it
You
actually.
can't get mad about that.
I don't
I'm
care.
looking at it right now. Chapter 2, special,
Okay,
edited
good.
in parentheses. I see it.
Good.
You dork. I'm gonna kill
Anyway,
you.
hello, everybody. God damn it. I have to force this guy to actually open this
You
by
are
starting the
crazy.
recording. Because otherwise he isn't gonna
All
pay
right,
attention. Say hello.
All right, welcome to. Hi, welcome to Story Time with Nico and Lad. We're having a bit of a conflict today. Okay, so today we're going to be reading Chapter 2, special of the story Archaotic Melancholy.
Yes,
And
indeed.
you're going to have to remind me, Nico, is it your turn to read the dialogue or is it mine?
It's my turn to read the dialogue.
Okay.
Okay then.
Okie dokie.
Do you have
And,
any? Do you have
without any
anything
further
to?
ado,
Do you have
here
anything?
we go.
Do you have
Chapter
anything
2.
to say before the start? Before we start, like from the chapter before, that you talk about it and you would like to add.
We haven't read this yet. How can we have
The
something
chapter
to say?
before that you might talk about.
This is the chapter, in the last chapter, whoever this baby Draconicus is, because I don't think they said her name,
No, I don't think so.
was put outside of Ponyville by the main six and Discord for various reasons, which were explained. But she has snuck back to Ponyville and is now being a total creeper, peeping Tom, staring at Cheerily through her window.
Okay,
And
so
that is about where the fic picks up.
no, I mean that if you have like a comment about that you might have talked about it in the time that we didn't record. Nothing.
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, then let's start then.
Chapter 2, Special. Not long after the release of the baby Draconicus had taken place, Twilight had made her way back to Golden Oaks Library, her temporary home, in a grumpy demeanor, of course. She stomped hooves angrily as she made her way through the door, slamming it behind her with her telekinetic magic almost immediately afterwards. Her brow furrowed as she went on over to her study and lowered her hind legs, sitting, then crossing her forehooves. Spike, of course, noticed the return of Twilight, although at the moment he was currently making something for dinner later. Nonetheless, he made his way into the main room from the kitchen wearing his chef's hat as well as an apron, all the while stirring a bowl of dough and gems. He was curious to what had Twilight so worked up, because even all the way from the kitchen he could feel the tension building just from her grumpy appearance. He looked at her with a sly smile as he continued to stir his ingredients as he said in an expecting tone.
So what happened?
Twilight immediately shot him a glance of discontent.
Immaturity, that's what happened, Spike. I decided to do what's best for Ponyville, and the others are gonna go threaten me like I'm the bad one here. I mean, sure, they understood a bit later, but it shouldn't have even been that big of a deal.
She let off an angry grunt as she just shook her head in disbelief, then levitated a book over to her desk and proceeded to read it, attempting to take her mind off the whole event. Spike was still so unsurprisingly confused, seeing as he just bickered about the whole thing and didn't really share the details. He sighed heavily as his eyes shifted left to right, then back at Twilight. He was hesitant but persisted to ask anyway, to satisfy his curiosity about what exactly had occurred.
Yeah, but what happened?
He was a little more direct this time, as if to put emphasis on the fact he had wanted to know the whole story. Twilight caught this, of course, although she was a little offended by his sudden change of tone. She winced slightly at her assistant before groaning softly to herself and shaking her head. She peered back down at the pages of her book as she proceeded to speak without making eye contact with him.
Cheerless class got interrupted by a rogue baby Draconicus. She wanted to keep it. Me and Discord told her no. We released it. End of story.
To this, Spike raised an eyebrow, his curiosity still unsatisfied. He then began to step rhythmically back and forth in a pacing motion, as if attempting to concentrate on two things at once. He repeated that same circular motion while stirring the dough and gems, while also listening to Twilight.
Wait, a baby Draconicus? Like a real baby Draconicus? As in a little baby Draconicus?
His eyes widened somewhat as he looked back at Twilight, raising his brow once more.
That sounds awesome! Why couldn't she keep it?
He smiled, staring back down at his bowl. To that question, Twilight felt like her mind had snapped. Her brow twitched as she looked highly irked by Spike's question. She slammed her book shut, looking absolutely devoid of emotion for a moment. She slowly turned to regard her faithful assistant with a scowl, before raising her forehooves into the air with a scream of utter annoyance. She gritted her teeth as she stomped back and forth in the library. She muttered,
It's as if no pony remembers that the harbing how do you pronounce that?
Harbinger.
Harbinger of this harmony is a Draconicus. I must really educate every pony on the danger they're putting their cell phone before they listen.
Spike trembled a little, although he was used to seeing Twilight angry. Her anger was never a pleasure to be around. He simply remained silent, as he knew the process. She'd soon most likely teach him what he needed to know. He stopped stirring, however, merely staring at Twilight as she proceeded to a specific shelf towards the back half of the library, the corner opposite from the kitchen and near the front door. Twilight levitated out a thick, dusty book from one of the shelves. She then immediately flipped through the pages, eyeing each one intensely as she stopped at a specific section before wincing impatiently at Spike.
Draconicus are known Draconicus are known to harbor very unusual behavior when raised to grow up in a family setting. Are you listening, Spike? Personality traits can rapidly spiral out of control, exhaling to the point of pure dementia. Should traits commonly encountered are obsession, severe paranoia, and intense jealousy. Although these are the most common of the cases, there are multiple other possibilities. It is highly recommended that those who encounter Draconicus in their adolescence remain aware of the risks and dangers to avoid them at all costs.
Twilight slammed the book shut before her nose wrinkled a bit.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg, Spike. Baby Draconics are not meant to be pets. They're not meant to live amongst other races. As cruel as it might sound, they're meant to live alone until adulthood. That's the way it has to be.
To this, Spike actually seemed a bit offended himself. He made his way over to a desk, then placed the bowl down, as well as the hat and apron. He then looked at Twilight with a defensive expression.
Wait a second, Twilight. You're saying that Draconicus are meant to be alone basically because
He crossed his arms.
they're considered monsters?
As Twilight was in the process of putting the book away, her eyes widened a bit at his sudden proclamation. Ooh.
Yeah.
She then turned to him with a slightly puzzled expression.
I never said that, Spike. That's entirely different.
Spike closed his eyes halfway with an amused look.
Is that so? What about me, Twilight? What about dragons? In the most common cases, they are meant to be raised by ponies are considered highly passive?
Twilight saw what he was getting at, obviously, and she didn't like it, not one bit. She winced at Spike and looked as if she were about to
He
say
has a
something in a
point.
moment. Yes, he does, but no words came. She simply turned with a slight huff beneath her breath, and then spoke in a calm yet defensive manner.
You're different.
You're different. Oh, that's yours.
You're different, Spike. You're special. You're not like other dragons.
Twilight cringed a bit at the slight irony of her own words. She knew she'd trapped herself by saying that, and was not looking forward to what her assistant would say next. Spike looked somewhat disappointed in Twilight. In actuality, he was a little hurt by those words. He simply shook his head before exclaiming softly,
All I'm saying, Twilight, is that perhaps everything doesn't go by the book. Is that really all that matters? What about all the issues impressive well planned over the time? What about Princess Alicia giving you my egg? What about special cases like me? Isn't it possible for them to exist on Draconicus too?
Spike eyed the ground solemnly as he sluggishly put back on his apron and chef's hat. He grabbed the bowl with a slight shrug.
After all that's happened, I guess I expected different. Maybe I'm just being silly, I guess.
He made his way back into the kitchen, whistling a soft tune beneath his breath afterwards. Twilight felt struck by Spike's words.
Twilight just got on.
She lowered her... Yeah. She lowered her head with a somewhat saddened expression, pondering whether or not she truly did do the right thing by kicking out the baby Draconicus. These days they were a really rare sighting, and she couldn't deny the possibility that things might have changed for the creatures since then. No, she had to be right. And besides, Discord was a Draconicus himself. He knew better than any pony there were no special cases. This was for the best, and the deed was already done. Every pony would get over it in the next few days, and everything would be peachy once more.
Of
Yes,
course.
I know. She's so optimistic, isn't she? Twilight smiled a bit, bringing herself out of a brief depression, then nodding in approval. Yes, everything would turn out just fine. She just knew it.
Of course.
The rest of the
What
day,
could
nothing
possibly go
interesting in
wrong?
particular happened. Of course. The rest of the day, nothing interesting in particular happened. As Twilight suspected, it already seemed like everything was returning to normal. The brisk evening breeze flowed steadily throughout the small town as when the blanket of stars arrived overhead. Nearly every pony went to their beds for some shut-eye. Charlie in particular couldn't seem to fall into a peaceful sleep. Too many thoughts occupied her mind. Her eyes were closed, but she tossed and turned, and was constantly facing away from the window at the moment. Oh, was currently facing away from the window at the moment. Looming outside Charlie's window. See, told you, creeper peeping Tom. Looming outside Charlie's window, the baby Draconicus was levitating, peering at the mare with an affectionate smile. Although she was told to leave, even though she knew she wasn't welcomed here, she risked returning for the sake of seeing Charlie once more. She placed her paw and claw on the window as her expression brightened somewhat, and she gave a cheery smile at the mare. She let off a soft
Ah,
as she looked at Charlie with excitement. Her eyes widened as she suddenly heard the sound of trotting down the path behind her. The baby Draconicus then hurriedly slithered its way to the roof, as it then peeked over the ledge to see who was lurking about so late at night. What she saw was two very peculiar mares. They wore ninja suits and seemed to be sneaking to
ah,
some other house in
are
particular.
still suits like pajamas? Everyone has one in Ponyville. What the hell?
Yeah, apparently. That or they're just easy to come by in a cartoon. What she saw were the baby Draconicus couldn't make out their features, but their manes were exposed, so she could tell at least that much. One had a pale cyan mane with white highlights, while the other had a curly mane with dark cobalt blue and light fuchsia highlights. The pale cyan mare spoke in a humid tone.
Wait until Octavia and Vinyl wake up tomorrow morning. They'll never know what hit them.
The one with light fuchsia highlights then spoke up in a confused tone.
Why are we even wearing ninja suits, Lyra?
The pale cyan mare revealed as Lyra Heartstrings' eyes widened as she regarded her friend.
Duh, Bonbon. Humans use these suits to been playfully with the night. They perfectly give face with objects like this.
Bonbon raised a brow at her close friend, then sighed heavily, rolling her eyes as they trotted off into the darkness further into Ponyville.
Yes, I mean home mans, of course.
Although a little unorthodox, these two mysterious mares were quite helpful to the baby Draconicus. She chuckled somewhat as she looked at the tiles of the roof where she was standing on, and smiled eagerly, muttering,
Ninja.
"Ninja!" Sorry, that's yours.
No, that's fine.
She then closed her eyes, focusing as she suddenly phased through the roof with a strange form of chaotic magic. As she fell inside the house flawlessly, nothing could stay perfect, of course. She plopped downward as she was suddenly in the attic.
Oh,
Laying on her belly, the baby Draconicus rubbed her head as her lower lip had puckered.
ow! I don't think I like ninja very much.
She rubbed the top of her head as she noticed an easy way out through a small box-shaped opening in the wall. Her expression brightened as she didn't hesitate to make her way through, exploring Charlie's home. As
Creepy.
Charlie had finally What?
Creepy.
Yes. As Charlie had finally managed to steadily fall into a deep sleep, it wasn't long before that peaceful moment would be interrupted by the echoing sounds of crashing kitchenware downstairs. Charlie's eyes snapped wide as she leaned up from her bed, heart racing as she did. She eyed her open door with paranoia, and her lights were off, so of course it had only made the suspense a little more frightening. She hurriedly climbed out of her bed as she proceeded to the doorway, cautiously, making sure to flip on her light switch when she'd made it there. The sound still proceeded to continue as Charlie couldn't help but gulp as she called out to whoever was downstairs.
Hello? Is any pony there?
Well, of course somebody was there. She really didn't understand why she asked something so obvious, but for some reason it comforted her. She called out once more as she slowly proceeded down the hall, still with a look of intense fear.
You know I'll call for help. You're not supposed to be in here. Please, I don't want any trouble. Just stop whatever you're doing and leave.
The sounds only continued. Crash, clank, crash. It was almost strange how obvious the intruder was, however. It was as if they'd wanted to be caught. Even the lights in the kitchen were on. Was there really a burglar this bad? Or
Oh,
was it something else?
you'd be surprised how stupid some people are.
Oh, so true. Charlie gulped once more as she trotted slowly downstairs, creaking with every trot. As she was now looking down the main hall, which turned to the kitchen at the far end to the right, she then peered over at a small lamp on a desk in the main hall. She snatched it, pulling the plug from its socket as she gave it a death clasp. She then stood on her hind hooves as she hung the object to her chest. Yes, making her way down the hall as quietly as she could. As she made it to the end, she closed her eyes tight. She was afraid, of course. Who wouldn't be? She took a moment to prepare herself for what she was about to do, and eventually Charlie mustered up the courage to make for the charge as her eyes then snapped wide, and she yelled out, turning into the kitchen as she did so.
I said to leave.
She was interrupted.
More sweets?
The baby Draconicus got in her face once again almost immediately. Charlie shrieked in terror as she stumbled backwards onto the ground, hurtling her lamp in the opposite direction on
Holy
impulse,
shit.
as she'd been caught by surprise once again. As Charlie was on her side, rubbing her head, she soon took a moment to regard the baby Draconicus, who had, surprisingly, returned. Charlie didn't know what to think as she stared into those wide eyes, so happy to see her. She simply stared at the Draconicus before a look of dread overcame her. She rose to hers as she looked down at the little Draconicus worriedly.
What are you doing here?
The baby Draconicus's expression sunk as she heard those words from Charlie. She now seemed confused.
Huh?
She then looked quite overwhelmed with worry. She rushed over to the middle of the kitchen. Charlie followed her every movement. The baby Draconicus was actually setting up 2 bowls, it seemed, although it made quite a mess finding them. There were now 2 bowls laid out on the table. She then levitated upward as she used her magic to place strawberry ice cream in the bowls. She then hurriedly grabbed one of the bowls, back over to Charlie, as she placed the bowl of ice cream in Charlie's hooves.
Putting like sweets, yes? I promise I won't be wet, I swear.
She chuckled nervously as she lowered her head with saddened eyes and twiddled her claw and paw, looking to the lower left.
You took care of the other little ponies. Well, I was wondering.
She grew silent as she peered at the ground, a crimson blush appearing over her face.
I was wondering.
She wanted to find the words, but couldn't, and one could notice the shame in her face for even suggesting such a thing, as if forcing the burden of herself upon somebody else. She simply quieted down, her body trembling, as she couldn't muster the courage to ask.
She's adorable.
Of course. Charlie's heart sunk. She looked down at the little creature as it avoided eye contact. All it wanted was some form of companionship, affection, family. Charlie lowered her frame as she looked at her with saddened eyes and shook her head.
I'm sorry, sweetie. It's not safe for you here.
Charlie looked to the lower right for a moment.
I don't even know where to start.
The baby Draconicus cringed at those words. Her eyes widened as she looked frightened, desperate. She shook her head.
I'll make you more sweets, and I can listen really good, and I'm a really good listener. I promise I'll be good from now on. Then we can talk. We can talk like anyone, like in the pony classroom.
Charlie shook her head as she rubbed the top of the baby Draconicus's.
I'm sorry, I just can't be responsible for your well-being in the circumstances, sweetie. I wish it were different, but you have to leave here.
The baby Draconicus looked at Charlie wide-eyed for a brief moment in despair. She then began sniffling as she slowly broke down, beginning to cry as she rubbed at her eyes, unable to hold back her little trickles of tears, as her soft voice cracked. She tried to stop rubbing at her eyes as she desperately wanted to not look rude and pathetic in front of the one she was attempting to win the favor of. But she couldn't stop herself. Her ears lowered as her eyes winced, and she lowered her frail, slender frame and buried her head in her slightly crossed arms.
My
Cheerilee now
heart,
was at,
it burns. Damn it. I'm way,
Cheerilee now was at a complete
I'm way too big for this stuff.
Charlie now was at a complete loss for what to do. The scene crushed her entirely, and she felt she was on the brink of tears as well. What was she to do? Twilight, even Discord, told her what had happened if Draconicus were taken in as family. Yet her whole life revolved around ensuring little ones were best off. Now she was looking at one, obviously at the end of their rope, desperate for anything close to a family, and unable to contain herself any longer. Who knows how long she had lasted out there alone, shunned, without any pony to give her any attention. Charlie held out a hoof to her, and felt in the next moment she would have to make one of the biggest decisions of her life.
What do you do, Chili? You know the risk.
She looked upon the baby Draconicus cry as her hoof trembled.
You know the risk. You know the... Oh, forget this. Forget the risk.
Charlie paused, gritted her teeth angrily, infuriated with herself. She couldn't let this go on, and even all day she'd been secretly wishing she could get this chance, a chance to make things right. She took care of younglings, didn't leave them out to fend for themselves, teach them what life was meant to be. That life was meant to be some forsaken world of lonesomeness. No, she couldn't bear to live her life knowing she'd done something so against her wishful way of thinking. Besides, who could hate such an adorable creature? She wanted nothing more than to take care of it herself, and she wasn't going to let some supposed risks get in the way of such a chance. Charlie grabbed the little Draconicus and pulled her close, hugging her tiny frame gently. The Draconicus's eyes widened slowly, as she'd never felt something like this before. The feeling of an affectionate hug, feeling of warmth, comfort, and safety. She was at a loss for words, as she trembled somewhat just at the confusion of the overwhelming sensation. Charlie spoke in a reassuring tone.
You have nothing to worry about, sweetie. Everything is going to be alright from now on. Can you tell me your name?
The baby Draconicus muttered in a slightly embarrassed tone.
Name? Well...
Oh my God.
So...
Doesn't even have a name.
God damn
What
it.
pitiful child have we stumbled upon here, Nico?
You know I'm weak to this stuff. You know
I
what?
think Nico is going to die young of a heart attack.
Of cuteness. I am so weak.
What happened, Doctor? He hadn't a sudden onset of cute attack.
You know I am weak to this. I can't take people crying like this. You know me.
And I am cold and heartless.
And that's why I hate you. Okay, anyway. Anyway, Doug.
I think, I am very pleased, both with the first chapter and with this chapter. Why am I talking like this?
I was about to ask that, but anyway.
Yeah. I'm very pleased with both the previous chapter and with this chapter. I think the person writing this has a talent for writing and is very good at it, and has presented in a way something that people have made Draconicus OCs and things like that, and they've made backgrounds, but no one's really gone to the depth of saying what happens to children Draconicus. Because everything starts as a child. The greatest of dragons, once upon a time, were an egg.
Yes, exactly.
The greatest of stallions were at one point just a coat. And so on and so forth. Everything, an elephant was once a baby, although elephant babies are quite large. And, all of these things. So a Draconicus clearly had a youth at some...
I wonder how was Discourse, dude. That's an interesting thought.
I would assume Discord's youth probably matched that of what he's assuming. I would almost think that Discord had obtained such a reputation as this chaotic Draconicus, that he solidified in pony minds the stereotype of Draconici being impossible to raise.
That could be an
And it
option.
just built.
Hmm.
And if it, for thousands of years, the entire time Discord has been encased in stone, Draconici have been seen as a threat. I doubt hunted because I don't really see ponies, having a Spanish Inquisition or,
They already said that at
a
one
killing
point they
order.
did hunt them,
Um,
though. Remember in the last chapter?
oh, that's true.
At least
That's
in
true.
this headcanon.
Um, okay. So, in either case, whatever it is, there are not many Draconici, which means that because of the smallness of numbers, they are difficult to observe. There's also the rarity. For instance, this appears to be the only known encounter with such a young Draconicus in years,
Hmm.
and especially in this localized area, so nobody has any idea where they're even coming from.
And
Uh,
the only Draconicus I've seen before is Discord, so that's not a good a good thing to, the
and
stereotype.
he's not a good example. So I think that this information about Draconici has been around for so long that ponies just assume that because it's been around for so long, clearly it's been tried and tested.
Hmm.
And yet it is because of the alienation of these creatures that causes their hostility and their chaotic natures. I personally think that something along those lines is much more nurture than nature.
Hmm. Even still, I actually really like this one because I really, me, I really like cute defenseless characters. So I really like the Draconicus. But I
For
really,
those of you who don't know, Nico has quite the feelings for Fluttershy.
you had to say it, don't you?
You can't deny it.
No, I can't. Even then, as I said before, I have those immense feel for like defenseless characters that, but like I don't mean like you know, for example, I don't mean just like this person that is like a shell that can't do anything. I don't like that. I like people uh who obviously can do a lot of stuff, but in terms of like standing up for themselves, they can't do anything about it. I find those kind of characters really, really what's the word? Enthralling to me.
Enthralling, yes, I can see that.
So yeah,
That's the correct word.
I am probably gonna enjoy reading this thing because the baby Dragonicus, but even then, I still really like the thing, and I really love the scene with Spike though. It surprised me. I really love that scene.
Indeed.
Do you have any thoughts on that one?
No.
You don't
Sorry.
really? I
A
mean,
man of few words, as you know.
yeah, but I mean that scene I really like. It's especially true because from what we see, what little have we seen on the show of the dragons, we have only seen mean dragons except for Spike. So even if all dragons were asshole, we can assume we can't assume that every single dragons are asshole because they're Spike. You know?
As a given, dragons cannot be considered evil. It is their background that considers them such.
Right. So I guess that's a really good comparison, and it's a really good parallelism to what's happening with the Draconicus. Like that's a good thing
Right.
that you put that scene on the fanfic. I hope it doesn't end there.
I
Like
think Spike is going to have quite the attachment to this Draconicus.
hopefully, I would really like to see a relationship between the two.
Hmm.
So relationships in terms of friendships.
Yep.
So anything you want to add?
I would add that this has been a wonderful reading, and I certainly look forward to the next reading with you, Nico. And thank you for all of you who have joined us again tonight for story time. Please join us next time, and make sure to check out Showtime when we do blind commentary of Season 4 episodes as they are released.
Thank you for your time and have a especially great day. And hope you find a baby Draconicus on the trash and take care of it. Otherwise, I will come to your house and murder you. Have a good day.
My wish is the same, minus the murder.
Have a good day.
You too.